Hello. This training requires a training certification form. There's a link directly below the one to get into this training that has a form that you should print out and fill out as you go along. That makes it easier to make sure that you get the answers to the questions right without having to go back and review the training again. You'll need to turn this form into the city clerk by mail, email, or in person. I'll also allow you to turn this in to the chief inspector, but you will not be compensated for your training until the certification has been completed and returned and is in my hands.
Hi there, my name is Lori Stottler and I am the Beloit City Clerk. One of my responsibilities in administering elections with the City of Beloit is to assist people in training so that they completely understand their role. This video is being a greeter at the polling place as well as election registration officials. So let's get started with the election registration official piece, and if at the end of this you still have questions, please reach out to me directly at my office, email me, and of course I'm going to be available on election day too. So let's get started.
If you've never worked at elections before, let me share a few things about working at the elections. First of all, it's a very long day. When you begin at 6 or 7 in the morning and work until 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, you'll want to make sure that you wear layers. It's hard to know if it's going to be hot or cold and how often you're going to be moving around. Wear comfortable shoes. Tennis shoes is a great idea for a day like today. Feel free to bring your own water or beverage. If you like tea or soda, bring enough to get you through the day. Many polling places have potlucks or they share a dish. We will try to also give you an opportunity to go out for a break. But if you want to bring a snack, that's perfectly okay. And then, of course, get a good night's rest before Election Day. It's going to be a long day, and I need everybody to be ready to go. It's important that you arrive on time, that you get in, sign the timesheet, and find your name badge, and then just try to be as helpful and patient in the morning as you can, helping the chief inspector get going. I'm going to ask that we refrain from using cell phones and tablets when voters are present. We want to make sure that they're getting our prompt attention. If there happens to be a lull or you need to take an important phone call, that's okay, but please communicate that so it's not frustrating for other poll workers. If you need a break, inform the chief before leaving the floor. And do your best work. I need you to write legibly and be complete. If I can't read the form, then we've wasted our time and I'm having to track down the voter to get the information. So please make sure that everything is written legibly and complete. And of course, I need you to stay until the work is complete that day. It's a long day. Everybody wants to go, but the chief can't do it without you. Electioneering is any discussion or wearing of clothing or signs or anything that will influence the outcome of an election. And as poll workers, we want to make sure that elections are carried out openly, fairly, and impartially. So leave all political stuff at home today, including your opinion. We want to be careful how we act with our body language and not to get drawn into discussions or interactions with voters, even if we feel the same way as them. Be careful not to coach a voter. We cannot explain beyond what is written on the ballot. You can help a voter. You can assist them by reading the ballot, going to the polls with them. You can even help them mark the ballot if you know how to follow the assisting rules. But electioneering within 100 feet of the entrance to a polling place is illegal, and the chief inspector can ask you to leave if they witness you engaging in electioneering. As I mentioned in the last slide, the voters' confidence and trust depends on you on Election Day. Interactions with electors, both positive and negative, can influence the public's confidence in the ability of election officials to administer elections in Wisconsin fairly, openly, and impartially. So as an election inspector, it's your responsibility to ensure that every eligible voter can participate in the democratic process. I'm asking you that we all be patient, kind, we provide quality work, we smile as often as possible, and if we don't know the answer, we'll get it, but let's not give any wrong information on Election Day. The chief should be available, and if not, we'll get back to the voter. You can always send them to the city clerk. We want to be very careful on Election Day not to give out the wrong information. Today your title is Election Registration Official, and you've been appointed by me, the City Clerk, to assist with voter registration on Election Day. I appreciate your help during a particularly high turnout election. Your being here today on Election Day will help ease the other election inspectors' workload as they process voters through, provide them ballots, and assist them with other things. So your voter registration assistance today is very welcomed and appreciated. Wisconsin is one state that allows for Election Day registration. If you're a qualified elector and can provide your proof of residence and follow the steps that we're about to go through, voters can register on Election Day, receive and cast a ballot, and that ballot does get counted like everybody else's. It is my intent to provide you with the supplies necessary to register voters on Election Day. If there's something that you don't have that you feel will help the process, please ask the Chief Inspector. You will have a sign that denotes that is the voter registration table, and you should have a table with enough chairs, clipboards, forms. I want you to know you have voter registration forms not only in English but also in Spanish and Hmong. You'll have label rolls for the voters to fill out to be able to put in the poll books later. We're going to go through all of this. I've included instructions for registering voters, proof of residence, quick reference guide, an ineligible voter list, an alpha list, a street directory. So you have a lot of supplies at the table. So hopefully you'll have time to get used to them in this presentation and know what to do with all of them. Just as important as it is to have the tools and resources to do your job on Election Day, it's important that we understand how to manage the traffic flow. You're going to have busy times and less busy times, but for the most of the day, it's probably going to be pretty busy. So if the voters are stacking up in line, please hand out a clipboard with a form on it and ask them to get started by filling out everything in the yellow, and then ask them also when you give them that if they have their proof of residence with them, because if they don't, they could stand in line for a long time only to be sent away to get their proof of residence. And then if they have their proof of residence and they can start filling out that form, just assure them that you'll be with them as soon as you can. We want to also make sure that the voters are in the right place. So if they seem uncertain that they're in the right place, quickly check the street listing or the alpha list or the myvote.wi.gov to find out before they stand in line too long. The street directory is a really handy tool to have the voter tell you where they live and find out what ward they're in and what polling place they belong in. So if the voter tells you that they live at 2605 Afton Road, you'll look down and find Afton Road, look left to the house range, and see that in the 2601 to 2711 on the odd side of the street would include your 2605 that the voter said. So now you're on the right row, slide across to ward number, and you'll see that that voter belongs in Ward 1. Keep sliding across to the right, and you'll see that it's Converse School. So this voter is in Ward 1 and will vote at Converse School. If you're registering voters at Converse School, you'll write Ward 1 at the bottom of the form when they're done and send them to the line for Ward 1. If you're not at Converse School, that voter will need to go to Converse School to register. You cannot register at one polling place and vote at another. So we have to get them in the right place first. Every polling place has an alpha list. Most of the time the alpha list will be at the greeter station. Sometimes there will be one at the voter registration table. This is for all registered voters. So if you're looking up a voter's name and she says she's Clarissa A. Anderson, you can ask her to verify her address. If she doesn't say 1982 Bootmaker, you can inquire, have you moved? At that point, she would need to re-register at her new address. We'd want to check the street directory to make sure she's still at the right place, and if not, send her to the right place. The alpha list is just a handy listing of all registered voters in the city of Beloit to help you make sure that everybody is in the right place. If the voters on this list, they are registered to vote and should proceed to the ward line to receive a ballot unless they tell you they've moved from the last election, at which time we'll have to make sure that they get registered in the right ward in the right polling place. If you have a smartphone with you or a tablet with you and have access to Wi-Fi, or if we've provided you a laptop, I can't encourage you enough to use the myvote.wi.gov application. Here you can search by address to help a voter find their polling place. As you can see on this screen, I typed in 100 State Street, Beloit 53511, and it brought up that I would belong at First Congregational Church in Ward 16. That is where you should have the voter proceed to in order to cast a ballot on Election Day once they're registered. This is a very, very handy tool, and if you have the electronic application and ability to use it, I highly encourage you to do so. The voter flowchart in this slide has probably more information than you need on it. If you look at the column that says not registered and follow it down, complete same-day registration. Then you get to the proof of residence provided in green or no proof of residence provided in red. I want to make sure that you understand that it's important that we ask voters up front if they have their proof of residence with them today, because the law is that every voter registering on Election Day must provide proof of residence. So if they don't have that proof of residence, they won't be voting. So a good script here would be, are you here to register or re-register today? If they say yes, proceed by asking, did you bring your proof of residence with you? If they say yes, verify that they are in the right polling place and ward, and then proceed by having them fill out the EL 131 voter registration application. If they say no, explain that all voters registering for any reason are required to provide proof of residence and help them determine if they have a document they could retrieve and return with before 8 p.m. tonight. People who do name changes, such as getting married, that still live at the same address are still required to provide proof of residence that has their full name and address on it. So I wanted to be very clear on this slide so that everybody understands that if you don't have proof of residence, you cannot vote on Election Day if you're registering on Election Day. So again, if you are registering to vote on Election Day and do not provide proof of residence, you cannot vote. Now that you have a lot of background with the tools and supplies, we can get started on getting someone registered. So if they're a qualified elector, that meaning they're a U.S. citizen, 18 years or older on or before Election Day, and they've resided in their ward for the last 10 consecutive days with no present intent to move, they're a qualified voter. There are three types of individuals who are disqualified from voting in Wisconsin. The first is one who is a person convicted of a felony. This person would not have been pardoned nor completed the terms of his or her sentence. So probation, parole, or extended supervision. You have a list on your table today. It's called the ineligible voter list. You'll be required to check every voter registration against that ineligible list. If a voter is on that list, you will not be able to assist them any further unless they have a letter from the Department of Corrections stating that they have been separated from their sentence and their term of probation, parole, or supervision. The second type is somebody that has been determined by a court, and that means a judge, to be incapable of voting, and so it's called adjudicated incompetent. Very different from somebody who comes in and says, I have power of attorney over my mother or grandmother and she has dementia and I don't want her to vote. Unless they can provide that a court has determined them incompetent to vote, that's the judge. So we have to be very careful there. And then, of course, someone who's under guardianship, unless the court has determined that the person under the guardianship is competent to exercise the right to vote, we need to accept that guardianship paperwork. But we do need to see paperwork on that. And of course, the third one many people don't know much about here. Anyone who has made or became interested directly or indirectly in any bet, wager, or outcome of an election. So anybody who has placed a bet on the outcome of this election should not be registering or voting. It's hard for us to tell, but if they have, they would be disqualified. The first two are the most important, and the ineligible list with felonies is your highest priority for today. Now that you have a little bit of background on eligible voters and ineligible voters, eligible voters need to do two things to register to vote on Election Day. They simply complete the voter registration application. I'll sometimes refer to it as the EL 131, which is the state's form name, and they need to provide proof of residence. We're going to go into more detail here ahead on those two items. This is a picture of the voter registration application, front and back. As you can see on the back, there are detailed instructions. You will have some laminated copies of that detailed instructions, and the front of your voter registration applications will have highlighted in yellow what I absolutely must have in my office in order to reconcile after the election is over. Section 1 tells us the reason for the application, the county, and the municipality of residence. There are three dials next to Section 1. A voter is new if they are not currently registered to vote anywhere else in Wisconsin, even if they've been registered to vote in Wisconsin in the past. We might hear very often on Election Day that they've registered and voted here before, but the state does a 4-year maintenance that makes anybody that doesn't vote every 4 years inactive. This voter may have become inactive and will need to recomplete the voter registration form and select new Wisconsin voter. The name change is required to update if you change your name. It may take some time for a voter to receive proper documentation of their new legal name. A registered voter may continue to vote using their former name until the necessary documentation to re-register is received. For example, somebody who got married in September or October might not have the new documentation yet, and we will allow them to vote under their old name until that new documentation has been received. And the third one is an address change. So a registered voter is required to update their registration if they wish to vote from their new address. I will already have completed the city and the county on your forms, so we just want to make sure one of those three dials is complete. The voter must provide an identification number in box 2. This doesn't require a visual confirmation from us, the election inspector, and the elector may just write it down and recite the number if he or she chooses. An elector cannot be required to show his or her driver's license, state ID card, or social security card as a condition of registration. If a registrant has been issued either a Wisconsin driver's license or state ID card that is unexpired, the registrant must provide the number and the expiration date, even if the registrant's driving privileges have been revoked. Also, if the registrant has a Wisconsin driver's license or state ID card that is unexpired, but they don't have the number or expiration date readily available, they can call the DMV on their own phone, option 1, to look up the information and provide it that way. If the registrant has either a Wisconsin driver's license or state ID card that is currently expired or canceled, request that the voter provide the identification information if available, but that registrant must provide the last 4 digits of the social security number as well. So, if the registrant has not been issued a Wisconsin driver's license or state ID card, then they should provide the last 4 digits of their social security number. Sometimes, in a very rare instances, they may have neither. That's where they would select that dial to the right there and indicate that to us. Sometimes voters have moved here from out of state, have not surrendered their out-of-state driver's license and set it up yet. That's where we would get those last 4 of the social. We've had 1 or 2 instances where either a very old farmer who was born on the farm never registered with the government and so didn't have either. Either way, this is the voter's responsibility, but we must have a number or they declare that they have neither before we can move forward. The voter should provide their full name as it is printed on the document they used in Section 2. unless the name on that document is no longer current and complete. They also need to provide us the month, day, and year of their birth. This is required, and it's impossible for us to reconcile if we don't have that date of birth. I can't stress enough to you as the registrant to be double checking that we have the full name and date of birth of every elector. Any phone number or email address provides us opportunity to contact the voter after the election if we don't have the information, but it is subject to open records requests. So I do not require it from voters. It's just helpful if we need to contact them. You can see there that you can indicate if you're military or permanent overseas. We don't really deal with too much of that on election day. And then the registrant should provide their current home address, full street name, including the type. So if it is 123 South Main Street, make sure we get the South and the street, not 123 Main, 123 S Main ST is the very least that we should have. A P.O. box is not acceptable as a residential address, neither is a rural route box without a number. We need to make sure that we have complete street addresses on our applications. You'll see further down here that there's a mailing address. So if the voter does not receive mail at that residential address and I need to send them a letter, what is their current mailing address? You'll see in section 6 and 7 that if they've had previously registered to vote in Wisconsin under a different name or a different address, I need that information provided to us. This helps to keep their voter record intact. What we'll do if they moved here from Rhinelander, we'll find their voter record in Rhinelander, we'll verify that this is the voter, and we will merge those documents together to keep that voter record intact. So that previous piece is very helpful to making sure that we have the voters connected and right in the system. Section 8 speaks to whether or not a voter would need accommodations such as a wheelchair, curbside voting, access to Braille. They can tell us that there. They can also tell us right below if they're interested in becoming like you and working at the polls. And the section to the right of that is if somebody is truly homeless and they have a letter as their proof of residency from a homeless shelter saying, we know that, Bob really does live in a van down by the river, they can actually mark here where that van has been parked for the last 10 days in order to prove that. If there is no street number or address as well, sometimes we have new developments where they've not been assigned yet, but the people are actually allowed to live. These are very, very rare, but it does exist on the form for that purpose. In section 9, you'll see two very important questions. They need to answer yes to both questions in order for the application to be approved. If they do not answer yes to the fact that they are a U.S. citizen or that they are 18 years of older on or before Election Day, you would need to reject their application. They cannot vote unless they answer yes to both questions. In section 10, the voter should read this language before certifying that they are an eligible elector and that they've resided in their ward for the last 10 days. They also should read to understand that they are not a disqualified voter and that they understand what they've filled out. Once they've read that, they should sign in box 11 and put today's date. Those 4 boxes to the right of today's date is where you, the election registration official, will record the proof of residence. We're going to go through that in detail here in a little bit. You can see right below there that falsification of information on this form is punishable under Wisconsin law as a Class 1 felony. Anytime we detect that there is voter fraud taking place, we collect the information and we supply that information to the district attorney for investigation and possible prosecution. So voters should understand, and it's not that you need to tell them that, but they should understand that voter fraud is taken very seriously in Wisconsin, and we do our best to make sure that we report anything that looks like it could be falsification or voter fraud. Once the voter says they've completed the form and that they're ready to move to the next step, it's your turn to check that the form is complete and that it is legible. I need to reiterate over and over again that that identification number in section 2, their full name, their full address, their date of birth, that information must be legible for me in my office, for my staff to be able to reconcile after election day. So this is a garbage in, garbage out. So please make sure that we have completeness and we have legibility before signing and moving on to the proof of residence. Now I need you to just take a quick minute and grab the ineligible voter list, and it's all alphabetical. Just check their last name, see if they're on the list. If they are on the list, grab the chief inspector the first time so that you know what to give the voter and what to say to the voter. If they're not on the list, proceed with recording the proof of residence, signing the form, and moving them into the voting line. So here where you sign, you are the official's signature. You're the registration official, so sign there, put today's date, and then you'll see that I need you to record the ward number. Please double check that on the street listing before writing that down, just as a double check that we have the person in the right ward. Assigning people to the wrong wards is the #1 error in voter registration. That and not getting the date of birth or the ID number. So those items are very important. Make sure and record it for me. So the last step is recording the proof of residence documentation in those upper 4 boxes. And I've kind of come up with, I've borrowed actually from the City of Madison, a little chant to help you remember what you have to put down. And it's a little Dr. Seussy, but it's what, who, for, or to. What, who, for, or to. What, who, for, or to. So if you can keep that in your mind, you can understand that you're going to provide the what, which is the type of proof of residence, the who, which is it a utility bill from AT&T? Is it a bank statement from BMO Harris? Is it a insurance statement from State Farm? So the what, the who, and then the for and the to is the number of digits you'll need to record based on the length of the account number. So let's find out what some of those proof of residences look like. I realize you can't read this form, but I want you to know that at your table you will have a complete listing, which is a 2-sided form, of all the different types of proof of residence. So I'll have you refer to this on election day quite often on the various types, because any old piece of mail won't do. It has to be a prescribed document on this list that the state has approved. Here I've just zoomed in on the most common proof of residence documents that voters bring in. It's very important that you understand that it must include the voter's current first and last name and the full residential address. So it can't just say L. Stottler, it would need to say Lori Stottler. And the current registration residential address would have to have the full 100 State Street, Beloit, Wisconsin 53511. Many people can use their Wisconsin driver's license or state ID card as both their proof of residence and their photo ID when they get to the ballot table. Any other identification card or license issued by a government body, there's many different forms here. A real estate tax bill, a university, college, or technical college ID card. They recently said that it could be expired as long as you're on the student listing. And for Beloit College students, I do get an updated student listing from the bursar's office prior to the election, and they are at each polling place applicable to Beloit College. We'll accept utility bills, a gas, electric, telephone. We'll accept bank statements. Paychecks and pay stubs. Now, many of those are done electronically through direct deposit in today's world, but a lot of times you'll get a direct deposit email confirmation, and sometimes that has that information on it, and they can provide that to us. A check or other document issued by a unit of government. So this would be maybe a Social Security check at the end of the month, disability benefit check from the government, a tax return check from the IRS. So this is not just a check from a bank. This has to be issued by a unit of government. A letter on public or private Social Security agency letterhead identifying a homeless voter, and I kind of referred to this a little bit earlier. Many times people go to the Salvation Army on a daily basis, but they're living on a park bench or under a bridge or somewhere they're couch surfing. The service agency can say, you know what, I know that this person has been staying in this area for the last 10 days, and I'm willing to vouch for that. We also can do a residential lease. So you would use the effective date, so the date that they moved in as their account number, and an intake document from a residential care facility, which we wouldn't really see on election day. So those are the most common types used by voters. Most of the time, that's what's going to do it. We do get some pretty tough ones once in a while, and we kind of have to treat them as a one-on-one basis. But now, how do you record these when you get them? Let's look at that. As you can see here on the top statement of a monthly bill from AT&T, we can record that what, who, for, or to. So in the what, you can write utility, or U for utility, W for Wisconsin, state ID, DOT type situation, bank, B for bank, but utility or U. The who is AT&T. The for or to. Now in this one you can see that account number is pretty extensive. It's a good dozen digits. So if it's more than 6 digits, you're going to record the last 4. So if somebody uses their Wisconsin driver's license, that's more than 4 digits. Record, or more than 6 digits. Record the last 4. If it's just less than 6 digits, like some of the Beloit utility accounts, I believe, are less than 6 digits. At that time, you only have to record the last 2. If it's easier for you to record the entire account, that's okay if it's a short one, but we prefer to have the 4 or 2 based on if it's longer than 6, record 4. If it's shorter than 6, record 2. That is the state guideline, and that is how I would like to see it done. So what, who, for, or to in this situation would be utility AT&T 9105. I need to include this slide here because sometimes we as election officials get confused between whether or not a voter is providing proof of residence or photo ID, and they are very, very different things. So when you're doing proof of residence, only a current and valid Wisconsin driver's license or state ID card with the voter's current name and address qualifies as proof of residence. So any document that they're giving to us must be current and valid, meaning unexpired, not suspended, not revoked. When we get to the whole photo ID piece and we're issuing ballots, then we have some differences that we need to look at because the law is different on what we can accept over there. In the case of providing proof of residence in order to register a voter, though, we are talking current and valid. Once you get over to the photo ID booth, the law changes, and I know that's confusing for voters. I just can't have it be confusing for election officials. So proof of residence and photo ID laws are quite different. Providing documents for where you live requires a current and valid document. The rules are very different, and I just want everybody to know this and remember this so that when we get to Election Day, people are not confused about what we're using for what. When you're registering voters, it's got to be a current and valid, current name, and current address. More recently, we've seen a lot of people who have gone to paying their bills online and going paperless, and that's great. We can accept electronic proof of residence. It gets a little trickier when we do that, but documents presented on a laptop, smartphone, or tablet are acceptable. Election registration officials are not required to provide computers or internet for the voters to obtain that information, however. So please don't feel like we need to be providing that for them to give us that information. And also I want you to know you're not required to handle a registrant's electronic device. Not only do they have a lot of germs, but they cost a lot of money. If you choose to do so, please do so with the registrant's permission. Otherwise, it's fine for them to look up the bill, find the number, zoom it in, and show it to you so that you can accurately record it. We're more online today, so I think we're going to see more and more of this as time goes on. You still need to make sure that it's a current and valid document. It has their full name and their full address. So you will need to be able to pull off that what, who, for, or to on any document that you accept electronically. The last step in the process for the voter is to complete 2 identical labels for the poll books. So while you're reviewing the information on the form and documenting the proof of residence, please hand the voter 2 identical, I believe they're 1x3 labels. We provide them on a roll and have them fill them out exactly the same, legibly, with their full name and their full address. What we'll do is we'll take one label and put it in the county poll book, one label and put it in the city poll book in the supplemental list. That is where they will sign one poll list and we'll reconcile to make sure that they get credit for voting, and we'll match their voter registration to that. So it's a critical step. Every voter has to do it, and they can be doing it while you're verifying the information and recording the proof of residence. I hope it's sounding repetitive and redundant by now, but give it one last look. Scan the voter registration application one last time to make sure that we have that identification number, that we have the voter's full name, the full date of birth, and previous information if applicable. Make sure the voter has signed the form. Did you sign the form? Did you record the proof of residence? Did you check this registration against the ineligible list? And did you record the ward based on the street listing at the bottom of the form? If so, it looks like we have a completed voter registration and someone ready to vote. Now that it's time to send the voter on, you'll give the voter the form and the 2 identical labels, and you'll send them to the poll book table. Now, in many of the wards that you're working in, the polling places, the lines are divided by the ward. So make sure that you get them in the right line so they don't go to the wrong line, stand there, and then have to stand in line again. So make sure that the handoff is being done properly so they're getting in the right line. They will put these in the poll book. A voter number will be assigned and written on the EL 131, right where you recorded the what, who, for, or to. We'll put the voter number. And then the voter will sign the poll book and be issued a voter slip to take to the ballot table so that they can finally vote their ballot. As you can see, voter registration on election day is a little bit more cumbersome than doing it ahead of time, but it is something that we offer, and it is something that I want to be staffed for because I do expect a lot of it. So thank you for understanding this and if necessary, going through it more than once so that we do a great job. Let's wrap it up with just a few slides on working as a greeter in case you get moved into that position. I can appoint one additional election inspector as a greeter at the polling place, and during these high turnout elections, I tend to have greeters at every polling place. Greeters acknowledge the voters and assist them in opening the doors if needed, acknowledging that maybe there's a curbside voter outside that needs some attention, so we'd be flagging down the chief inspector to get that started. You also serve as a resource for answering questions about the polling place and where a voter needs to go in order to register to vote or receive a ballot. If the layout of your polling place allows for it, a table near the entrance of the voting room is set up for a greeter station. You'll have lots of supplies out there. One or more election officials will be stationed to greet the arriving electors. You're a little bit like the hostess with the mostest, just confirming that they're in the correct place. There's some do's or don'ts I want to go over with you on this. But one thing that you'll see I have in the yellow is that greeters should not be checking the photo ID. That is only done at the poll book table. You may remind voters to find their eyeglasses if needed for signing the poll book, as well as having their their photo ID ready to show at the poll book table, but do not check their photo ID at the greeter table. You are only asking them to have that ready to keep the traffic flow moving. We had some problems with this in April, and I just need to reiterate that we should not be checking the photo ID. That is done at the poll book table only. A voter should only show that photo ID one time at the poll book table. As with the other stations at the polling place, the greeter has tools and resources in order to do a great job there. I'll provide an alpha list. We went through the alpha list. It has all the registered voters as of November 4th. You'll have the street listing, so if somebody is new to town, you can look them up and make sure they're in the right place and in the right ward. You'll have a folded ward map, so a pretty large map of the city that can help people get around if they need to go from one place to the other. You'll have some sample ballots. You'll have some election worker application packets. So you'll have some additional information that you'll be able to use as a resource. Going over some do's and don'ts. If you see something, say something. Anything that seems unsafe, anything that seems to be threatening, whether it be people or the weather or water on the floor, please say something. So we need to keep the polling place as safe as possible and keep any incident from happening. Do allow voters to ask for information. If you don't know the answer, though, we'll get the answer, but we have to be very careful not to give out the wrong information or be too anxious to send somebody off. Offer to look up for them in the Alpha directory if they don't know their ward. But if they come in and they appear to know where they're going and you say, do you know what ward you're in? And they say yes, then just let them proceed to their ward line. Many, many voters in this city have done this dozens of times, and we don't need to stop every single voter at the greeter table. If somebody does want to be ensured that they're in the right polling place, if they're new to the city of Beloit or if they haven't voted in a while, certainly look them up. But those that seem to know where they're going, don't stop them. Also, if you're using the street directory or the alpha list to send someone to another polling place because they're in the wrong place, grab another poll worker before you send them away and have them verify your information. So just if you're telling Bob that he needs to go from Hackett to Converse, grab somebody and say, I looked this up. I just need to verify that they do indeed need to go from Converse to Hackett. Will you double check? We have had a lot of people sent to the wrong places and running around town on election day. Having someone double check your work and verify that we are indeed sending them to the right place can save us and them a lot of frustration. Again, I'll tell you, do not ask to see the voter's ID. So that is just a big, big no-no. And do not give information that you don't have the answer to. So as much as we want to be helpful, we have to be careful not to guess at information. Elections are very specific and very important, and if we don't know, it's okay. There's a lot that we don't know. We'll look up the information. We have election day manuals, election administration manuals. We have access to the state, so we'll look it up. So as a greeter, you're really going to be a resource for people. Most importantly, as that gatekeeper at the front, if you see something, say something. We want to make sure that we keep it safe for all of you and for all of the voters. So that's it. I've thrown a lot of information at you over the last half hour, 45 minutes. I hope that you enjoy your election day experience, and I hope that you know by helping at the polls you bring value and trust to the process. I'm very, very grateful for all of you willing to work with me on election day to administer the election openly, fairly, and impartially. I want you to know that it's very important to me and to my staff that any elector who wants to cast a ballot is able to do so and know that their ballot was counted. And because of you and because of your willingness to be trained, your willingness to serve and to understand the rules, we in Beloit can be proud that that happens. So thank you for your time, and until next time.